And this is a content-free piece. It does require of whoever chooses to sit in this chair some issue of significance to you that has some history behind it. That is, that it wasn't something that just started today, but has had some presence, you know, in your life and experience on up until now. So I'm wondering who will come and join me up here for an exercise called Magic Hands. It's pretty cool. It's the best ride in town. You know you want to. You got something in mind? Yeah, good. Well, you know you want to. All right. So actually, if we can angle just a little bit, it might help for the camera. You're not too self-conscious about that, are you? It's only for these people.
It is what it is.
It is what it is, and you can forget about it because it isn't very important. And the nice thing is, like I said, it's entirely private anyway. You don't really need to talk about anything at all. So, how many hands do you have?
Two.
Two, like so many of us. That's nice. That's nice to know. And as you look at them, do they look pretty much the same to you, one to the other? Other than being mirror images?
Similar.
Does it seem that one of them is maybe a little bigger than the other?
Yes.
Yeah, it does? Which one? The left one is a little bigger than the right one. Uh-huh. So I've got that. You just reminded me by noticing that this one is a little bigger than the other one. Milton Erickson has a story that he used to tell people often. They call that I call Milton's respirator story, for reasons that will be obvious in a moment. It seemed that one of his favorite ways to bring people out of trance, the end of a session, would be to sort of break the state by offering something entirely other and a little bit amusing. But I think often he did it for his own amusement as much as anything. But he would pose riddles. So somebody's deep in trance, and he would say to them as they're beginning to come up, he says, "Now, in a moment, you're going to come back to the room. But before you do that, there's something you might like to consider. I've got a question for you to think about. So Mr. and Mrs. Bigger had a baby. Who was biggest?" And of course, then finally people would pop out because they're like, well, who was biggest, right? You'd say, "The baby was a little bigger." And laughed so hard that he had to grab his respirator to catch his air in order to continue the conversation. Very few people ever come out of a trance like that. But it was a special thing about the good doctor. So yeah, so your left hand is a little bigger. It's kind of like the Bigger's baby. And there's another thing I'd like you to know. Just kind of hold your hands out like this in front of you like this. And I'm wondering, as you do that, if you sort of get a sense of the weight of your hands. Does one of your hands seem to be heavier and one lighter? Or is it the other way around?
That one's heavy.
This one is heavier, and this one is a little lighter. Okay? And you know, you can check both sides. They seem to be, does one seem to be warmer and one cooler than the other? Or pretty much the same?
Pretty much the same.
Now, on the other hand, you might say pretty much the same, but I'm wondering, even though they're pretty much the same, does it seem like the back of the hand might be warmer than the palm of the hand, or is that the other way around?
Palms feel cooler.
The palms feel cooler, and the back seems warmer. All right? Now, I'm going to ask you a real psychological question here. If you just sort of be aware of both of your hands for a minute, and this question is probably for your inner mind as much as anything. If one of those hands were your adult hand, and one of those hands were your child hand, I wonder which one would be which. What do you think about that? child on this side, and your adult on that side over there. Okay? And finally, I wonder, do you know who Kuan Yin is? She's a goddess, I think a Hindu goddess, right? Hindu or maybe some branch of Buddhism. And usually when she's depicted, she's in a pose like this or like this. I don't know which one. I think it varies from statue to statue. And it's almost as though one of these hands is inviting, and the other one is like a stop sign. Do you have a sense of that? So as you check it back and forth, for you, which one is more the stop hand and which one would be more the inviting hand? Which way does that make more sense? Like that. So this is the stop hand and that's the inviting hand. By the way, just curiously, this little exploration I think is interesting because there's a lot of clients that I've had in my life that could have used a lesson in when to say, come on in, and when to say, keep the hell away. Could have been useful in some people's history, could be useful in some people's present, and could be useful in other people's future. But like this for you. Okay? All right, now, just put both your hands out in front of you like this. And I want you to look at those hands. Here's the induction, folks. I want you to look at those hands as though you've never seen them before. And so you look back and forth between them and you might notice some similarities and some differences. You might notice some differences in the lines, for example, in the hand, maybe your lifeline or your heart line, or maybe you don't know what a lifeline or a heart line is. I don't know what you know about that. But as you just continue to explore that, there's a couple things you can also be aware of. As you hold them up like that, you can feel the weight of them, can't you? And they're suspended in space in front of you. And a little bit of suspense is a useful thing to have when you're entering into a hypnotic experience. So what I'd like you to do now is to just go ahead and close your eyes, letting your hands still be there. You can feel the weight of them. You can be aware of their location in space. And I wonder, with regard to the situation that you've got in mind that you'd like to bring some attention to in this process, which one of those hands is going to be the one to begin, really slowly now, to begin to find its way down into your lap as you review the history of this situation, as you consider some of the implications in your past or the consequences of this thing that you're thinking about, maybe some beliefs that you have associated with it, some ways in which it has affected or influenced you through time. And to just study and be aware of everything that comes into your awareness regarding the situation up until now. How it's been, where it's presented itself, how you have felt about it, what it has meant to you. Maybe any action that you've taken to try to make changes with regard to that situation. That's right. Take all the time that you need to make a thorough review, particularly being aware of any beliefs that continue to affect you up until now. That's right, with regard to that situation. Because then as that other hand begins to slowly and thoughtfully find its way down, you can start to consider some of the possible options and choices, whether they constitute changes in behavior or changes in attitude or relationships, new ways of moving through the world, new ways of thinking about those situations, new beliefs that could be helpful to you and serve you in some particular ways, maybe even realizing what those ways would be, or maybe mysteriously being curious about just how it's all going to resolve, and noticing as well, that's right, Peter, about what it's going to mean to you finally to have resolution around this issue. Because you have made a thorough review of the situation. That's right. And of everything behind it. And you've begun to orient toward a future where changes and new possibilities and new awarenesses and understandings can emerge. And isn't it nice to know that all of that can take place so effortlessly, so quietly, so simply, as you relax in the chair, just as easily as letting one hand come down and another hand come down, and making it possible for your unconscious mind to do something important in the background. And it's nice that important things can happen in the background, but our lives aren't lived in the background. So it's also nice to be aware of the fact that you have an unconscious mind, and your unconscious mind can do a great many things for you. But you also have a conscious mind. And your conscious mind is the one that experiences your life, that enjoys your enjoyments, and that suffers your pain. So in order to validate this process and to utilize all of that unconscious learning and to allow it to come forward in a way so that it can take expression in your life, we need to open up a door. And opening up a doorway for the unconscious is a rather unusual thing. Because after all, if your unconscious mind were to come forward a little bit, you wouldn't know it until it became conscious. And then it wouldn't be your unconscious mind at all. And that means that you'd really be able to enjoy and appreciate the changes that are occurring. So in order to validate it in the real world in real time, perhaps what would be useful for you to do is to make to yourself a commitment to what I would call a behavioral prescription. And what I mean by that is a very simple thing. What I mean by a behavioral prescription is for you to allow yourself to discover, perhaps aided and abetted by your own unconscious mind, maybe even under the influence of a certain old man from Arizona, to select some small piece of behavior, and it can be anything you want it to be. Some small piece of behavior that you can commit yourself to doing on a daily basis for the next week or so. It doesn't have to be obviously related or connected to the situation that you've been working on. It just needs to be something that you can do so that when you do it, you'll know that you've come to a place where you can take some appropriate action to bring about that change. I had a student once who decided that every day for the next 2 weeks he was going to brush his teeth with his left hand. I didn't know what it meant. He didn't know what it meant. But he knew that it would serve as a reminder, and it was something that he was going to do every day anyway. So we might as well make it meaningful to him. So you can go ahead and choose a piece of behavior for yourself. And when you've made that choice, it's a nice way to know that you can do something consciously and deliberately while your unconscious mind does something in the way that unconscious minds do best, to solidify that change, to ratify that change, to give it more and more expression in your life every day. And when you've decided on that behavior that you want to engage in, that prescription that you've chosen for yourself, then I think it might be interesting once again to let yourself become aware of the fact that your left hand is a little bit bigger than your right one, and that baby was a little bit bigger as well. And to bring your attention back out here to this place and join us in the room. I have a quotation for you from my father, who from time to time would look around the room and go, huh. He told me I should share that with you, so I figured I might as well. I wouldn't want to get in any trouble. So welcome back.
Thank you.
Yeah, good. Would you be willing to share with us what the behavioral prescription was?
Yeah, it was 10 minutes self-meditation every day for next week, which is something I've started doing the other day. So
Yeah, self-meditation as opposed to hiring somebody to do it for you.
yeah, it's cheap.
Yeah, that's a good idea. Great. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Yeah. I like that. I love that piece.